On this Sunday night, eyewitness allegations against powerful forces on both sides of the Atlantic. In a Canadian exclusive, a whistleblower cries foul about Brexit's Leave campaign and points to a Canadian company.
You have meddled with our democracy.
While in the United States, the woman known as Stormy Daniels finally speaks out about her relationship with Donald Trump.
He knows I'm telling the truth.
Will the allegations change anyone's mind? This is The National.
You've been hearing a lot about Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, and how companies can use information to target you, to influence your vote. Now, from whistleblowers, we're learning more about the role a Canadian company played in one of the most consequential vote results in recent history, the UK's decision to exit the EU.
Independence Day! The dawn is breaking on an independent, united kingdom.
Fact, it was close. 51.9% voted to leave. Question, did all sides play by the rules? Possibly not, is the concern embedded in hundreds of documents landing at the UK Electoral Commission just a few days ago, providing some of the most compelling evidence yet that the Vote Leave campaign may have overspent its campaign limits, giving it an extra last-minute edge. A big deal? Well, here's how the lawyer putting together the dossier described it to CBC News.
Because the referendum was a close-fought contest. It's massively constitutionally significant. If there was overspending, then what has been trumpeted as the will of the people might have been, in fact, something that was paid for. That really matters.
The UK's Guardian, the New York Times, and the National have obtained access to some of the key documents, two of the whistleblowers, and the story of the Canadian connection.
We've got our country back.
How the Brexit vote came to in any way be associated with the small BC company started with an early morning email from now famous Canadian whistleblower Chris Wylie to another Canadian, an old colleague, Jeff Sylvester, back in August of 2013. It was about Wylie's job in London with what would be the parent company of Cambridge Analytica. CBC has seen a duplicate of the exchange. We mostly do psychological warfare work for NATO, Wylie offered, explaining its political and social campaigns too. You need a Canadian office, came the response from Sylvester. Basically, that's how the idea of aggregate IQ was born. By 2016, it was its own completely independent Canadian entity.
On June 24th, Vote Leave.
And a powerhouse on the official Vote Leave campaign.
40% of the Leave campaign spending went to this small, tiny company on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. And its role in Brexit is fairly central because it managed all of the digital and social targeting for the pro-Brexit campaign, for Vote Leave.
That effectively means pinpointing and reaching out to likely supporters.
But it's like...
Wylie was still in the picture, was introducing another friend, Shamir Sani, to work as a Vote Leave volunteer, as he told CBC News in a Canadian exclusive.
I joined the Vote Leave campaign as a volunteer several months before the referendum.
There he is, beaming in his Vote Leave shirt. He was soon asked to work on a youth outreach arm called Believe. The small Believe unit, Sani says, talking to, taking instruction from the established Vote Leave team, and more.
We were based in the Vote Leave office and we were in constant communication with other Vote Leave staff members because as volunteers we never saw ourselves as having full control over the outreach group because we didn't have the experience.
That's important. His words and the new supporting documentation offer what Sani's lawyer says is the first substantial evidence these groups worked closely together. Why does that matter?
So there's no rule against coordinating campaigns. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when two coordinated campaigns are used to exceed spending limits. This is about spending.
It's not clear that's what happened, but money, it seems, was an issue for Vote Leave. CBC has seen a witness testimony that suggests towards the end of the campaign, it was office chatter that Vote Leave was nearing its £7 million spending cap. To spend more would be breaking electoral law. But little Believe seemed to be just getting started. Sani, now in a leadership role, no longer just a youth branch. It was its own campaign organization with a smaller spending limit of its own. One day, Vote Leave officials brought good news. Believe was getting donations of roughly £625,000.
This was very close to referendum day. So by this time, we had decided to give we had been told that we have to give the money to AIQ, and AIQ being a Canadian company, I guess, who were actually based in the Vote Leave office. They were there till the last day. They were there on referendum day.
AIQ, that's Aggregate IQ. So this Canadian-based company already working with Vote Leave that had, according to Sani, workers in the Vote Leave offices was now going to be paid to work with Believe. So what did Believe get for that money? Sani maintains it was just a few thousand phone numbers and emails. If he's right, he says that seems like a lot of money for not much return. Did AIQ really spend it all on Believe, or did it go elsewhere?
There's a hole in this story, which is precisely what AIQ did with all the money they were given by campaigners in the EU referendum. What happened to that money? Who were they working for, and what messages did they put out, to whom, using what data?
AIQ told CBC News in a statement the money it received was only used for Believe's campaign and purposes and no other purpose. Vote Leave and Believe have both issued statements saying they were completely separate entities and spending caps were not violated. But this doesn't seem to sit well with Sani.
Why are we being constantly told by senior staff members of Vote Leave that we didn't coordinate when we so obviously did? One reason I'm doing this is because the people of this country were lied to.
You can't undo Brexit. Once Brexit happens, it's done. And for me, what's so concerning is that the scale of cheating that happened potentially on the referendum, irrespective of whether you supported Remain or Leave, this is an irreversible change to the constitution of a country.
So these are hard statements to make. And so in all of this, what of Aggregate IQ? What did it know or do? In an email response to CBC, AIQ wrote, AIQ works in full compliance within all legal and regulatory requirements in all jurisdictions where it operates. It has never knowingly been involved in any illegal activity, adding it was not aware of any evidence of coordination between Vote Leave and Believe to break any rules. Wendy Mesley has been working on the story for her Sunday morning program, The Weekly. Wendy, we just saw that there are questions about Aggregate IQ in the United Kingdom, but there are questions here as well.
It's really interesting. We know that the UK Information Commissioner is investigating Cambridge Analytica. Late last week, it got a warrant to go in and search the Cambridge Analytica offices in London. And part of that investigation includes the company's links to Aggregate IQ. So, of course, that company, AIQ, is based in BC. So trying to figure out what's going on here, I spoke to the province's Privacy Commissioner, and he says, yes, they are cooperating with the UK's investigation into the possible unauthorized use of people's data for political purposes, and whether AIQ may have been involved here. So I, of course, wanted to know exactly what are you looking at, and he says, well, there's an ongoing investigation. I can't hear and in the UK, so he can't give us any details. So I said, well, what then is the general concern?
Well, the concern is that information cannot be disclosed or even collected or disclosed unless we have informed consent of the individual. So if people didn't know that their information was being used, then that's offside with our privacy legislation here in BC. And we want to know the facts around, did they collect information, did they use it, and did they disclose it to anyone else for purposes that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, so people may not know this, but BC has particularly tight privacy laws, so that's interesting. There have been suggestions from the UK Privacy Commissioner that AIQ has not been fully cooperating with her investigation. So I asked MacArthur, are they fully cooperating with your investigation? He said, it's early days. didn't answer the question, but that he does have the power to go to court and compel AIQ to fully cooperate if necessary.
So we know that AIQ knows about all of these inquiries. What's it actually saying about them, though?
Well, the company's not giving interviews anymore, but it did send me a statement where it said about MacArthur and the Privacy Office, saying Aggregate IQ is and always has been cooperating fully with the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner for BC. AIQ also stressed to us that it has never been a part of Cambridge Analytica or its parent company, SCL. But that's odd because the co-founder of AIQ told me a couple of weeks ago in a phone conversation that, yes, it had sold its data technology to SCL, the parent company of Cambridge Analytica. So there are some links here. What are they exactly? Well, we'll have to wait for the investigators to report.
Okay, a lot more to come. Wendy Mesley, thanks very much.
Oh, thanks, Adrian.
And those investigations are top of mind tonight in Britain's halls of power. Theresa May facing critical new questions about the Brexit vote. That's because people who now advise the British Prime Minister are directly linked to these new allegations. Thomas Dagler picks up the story from London.
As Brexit draws closer, people here look back at the referendum with more and more questions. And second thoughts are turning bitter.
I can see that there could be some underhand business going on, and we've all got sucked into it.
Well, if it's true, it's really unforgivable. But I mean, it's hard to know exactly what the facts were.
That's where Kyle Taylor comes in, a Canadian-American activist for electoral transparency based here in the UK.
Here on the evidence page, we've got what the Electoral Commission says is sort of coordination. And
his Fair Vote campaign is sharing the whistleblower's emails and documents for the whole country to see. Files that purportedly show coordination between Brexit campaigns that may have allowed Vote Leave to cheat.
I hope that people are outraged and worried because what happened here can happen again, and and from what we've seen has happened all around the world.
Boris Johnson, a leading voice for Brexit, now Britain's foreign secretary, called the allegations utterly ludicrous. Vote Leave won fair and square and legally, he tweeted.
The individuals concerned have denied it. It's really a matter, if there's any truth to it at all, for the Electoral Commission to investigate.
Making matters even more awkward, at 10 Downing Street, two of the Vote Leave officials under media scrutiny now work here as advisors to the Prime Minister. One of them, Stephen Parkinson, responded to the allegations by denying wrongdoing and revealing his past relationship with the whistleblower, Shamir Sani.
Outing him as gay to his family in the world, family he has in Pakistan, who are now fearing for their safety. I mean, what have we come to?
This MP says an investigation by the elections watchdog isn't enough.
The police need to come in. I mean, this is criminal law. This is criminal law breaking, if it's true.
There's no plan for Britons to get a second say on leaving the EU. The country continues its slow drift toward Brexit. The truth around the vote is as murky as ever. Thomas Dagler, CBC News, London.
Okay, Adrian, a lot here, a lot of things going on in different cities. What's next in all of this?
Well, tomorrow the two whistleblowers are going to hold a news conference in the UK, and a portion of those documents will be landing on the desks of some investigators and some parliamentarians. So this is likely to stretch out a bit.
And we'll continue to watch it. But let's turn now to a much different kind of political controversy, this one in the United States. And millions have been watching the CBS News program 60 Minutes tonight, wondering, did Stormy Daniels live up to her stage name? She's been the eye of a hurricane around President Trump for weeks. Until now, Daniels has remained silent about that alleged sexual encounter with Trump, the billionaire businessman, more than a decade ago, and the payment she received from Trump's lawyer that some are describing as hush money. So what did she say? Ellen Morrow has the details.
Donald Trump had no response for reporters as he arrived at the White House after a weekend at his Florida retreat, but he had to know this was coming.
Because it was very important to me to be able to defend myself.
Stormy Daniels' first television interview on her alleged sexual encounter with the president.
You told Donald Trump to turn around and take off his pants?
Yes.
And did he?
Yes. So he turned around and pulled his pants down a little. You know, he had underwear on and stuff, and I just gave him a couple swats.
Daniels, a porn actress, says she had sex with Trump just once in 2006. She claims she was later told to keep quiet or else.
A guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story." And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "A beautiful little girl, it'd be a shame if something happened to her mom." And then he was gone.
Daniels also discussed a $130,000 payment she received from Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, a so-called hush agreement signed just days before the 2016 election. Cohen now says he paid out of his own pocket and was not reimbursed by the Trump campaign, but it could still be a big problem for the president.
It's a $130,000 in-kind contribution by Cohen to the Trump campaign, which is about $126,500 above what he's allowed to give. And if he does this on behalf of his client, the candidate, that is a coordinated, illegal, in-kind contribution by Cohen for the purpose of influencing the election.
I think I ended the relationship.
Daniels' interview comes just days after this.
Somebody's lying, and I can tell you it's not me.
Former Playboy playmate Karen McDougal detailing her alleged affair with the president.
Well, after we had been intimate, he tried to pay me, and I actually didn't know how to take that.
Did he actually try to hand you money?
He did.
The White House has denied that Trump had sex with McDougal or Stormy Daniels, but Trump himself has been uncharacteristically quiet.
The president watches 60 Minutes. If he's watching tonight, what would you say to him?
He knows I'm telling the truth.
Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
So far, President Trump has been the Houdini of political scandal, always escaping, but Stormy Daniels represents 1/3 of a litigation drama which could at least mean further embarrassment. The women versus the Donald.
After we had been intimate, he tried to pay me, and I actually didn't know how to take that.
Karen McDougal was a Playboy model in 2006 when she says she met the married Donald Trump and began a 10-month affair.
Were you in love with him?
I was, yeah.
Then, during the presidential campaign, the company that owns the National Enquirer paid McDougal $150,000 for her story, but it was never published. McDougal now says she was misled and has sued to invalidate the contract.
I'm not out to make money on this. I'm out to get my rights back, to prove a contract was illegal, that I was taken advantage of, and then go back to my life.
In a third case, Summer Zervos, a former contestant on The Apprentice, is suing the president for defamation after he blasted her allegations that she was sexually harassed.
He put me in an embrace, and I tried to push him away.
This week, a New York judge ruled her suit could proceed, so 3 cases which raised the specter of Donald Trump having to answer questions under oath, which could lead to the risk of serious political damage.
Ahead tonight on The National, Nala Ayed will take us on an unusual sightseeing tour in London. You won't find Big Ben or Buckingham Palace on it. Instead, multi-million-dollar properties used to launder dirty Russian money.
And a little later, she's 22 years old, still lives with her parents, and tonight she's in the same Juno category as Shania Twain and Gord Downie. I'll sit down with Ruth B.
But first, as hundreds of thousands mobilize in the wake of the Parkland school shooting, Paul Hunter talks to students in Baltimore who are all too familiar with gun violence and who are asking, what about us?
How many people here know somebody who's being shot? Raise your hand.
When somebody got shot here, did Parkland come say something to us? No. Did we have a march? No.
Baltimore doesn't get a voice all that big because the city is predominantly black.
Margins on car sales have become so slim that many dealerships now make more money on service and repairs than on new and used car sales combined.
If you booked in for a peace of mind inspection, check your brakes.
What you may not know is that service advisors don't have to be mechanics, and the more they sell you, the more they can often make. Lucas Lung learned it firsthand in his years as a service advisor.
I would say 90% of these dealerships do work by commission. When you're a service advisor, you are a salesperson. This is how you make your living, right? So you have to upsell them. They come in for an oil change, you're upselling somebody.
Holy cow, $1,200.
Marketplace heard many complaints from across the country, so we ran a series of tests. An expert
Hi, nice to meet you.
pre-inspected this woman's car, then we asked a dealership for their diagnosis. It came by phone. Get the brakes done.
So what he was suggesting is to replace the rear brake drums and the brake shoes. With parts and labor, it'd be about $621 plus tax.
Wow, is that something that I can think about?
But our expert rejected that.
When I had the drums off, everything looked perfectly normal for that age of brake.
Not only did the dealership recommend service that wasn't needed, they also failed to mention something that was. The largest recall in automotive history, the car's potentially defective airbag.
What does the law say about a repair shop telling you need to do something before you need to do it, or you don't even need to do it at all?
Repair shops cannot offer services that aren't needed.
Harry Malley is with Ontario's government watchdog.
They can't mislead you if it's a service that's not needed. They can't be like, this is needed to fix your car.
If you do 84 months...
Head to the dealership.
84 months, 7 year.
And you're likely to hear this pitch.
127 bi-weekly at 84 months.
Most of the 10 we visited only mentioned 7-year loans. Only rarely did we hear about what used to be the norm, 4 or 5 years.
That to me is short-sighted, just a recipe for problems.
Ontario's auto regulator doesn't much like that, thinking more options should be presented up front. But this auto expert cautions against using a long-term loan at all.
Long-term loans with the low monthly payments often encourage consumers to buy a more expensive car.
Just watch. A $20,000 car on a 5-year loan costs $154 bi-weekly. But a $30,000 car, it's just $11 more, as long as you pay for 2 more years. But beyond spending more, there are big risks with long loans.
The last thing you want to do is be in a situation where you're making payments on your vehicle at the 6th year or 7th year.
I
texted my relatives my last goodbyes. I didn't know where we were going to land.
Some frightening moments for passengers this evening on board an Air Canada flight from Toronto's Pearson Airport to Washington's Reagan National. The plane had to make an emergency landing at another Washington airport, Dulles. After pilots saw smoke in the cockpit, the landing, we're told, occurred without incident, and all 63 passengers and 4 crew members are unharmed. At least 37 people are dead after fire tore through a shopping mall in the Russian city of Kemerovo. That's about 3,000 kilometers east of Moscow. The Russian media reporting that dozens more, including children, are missing at this hour. An investigation has been launched to try to figure out what caused the fire.
It's a British attraction many tourists may have missed. The Dirty Money Tour, organized by an anti-corruption campaign. It offers a glimpse into a world of mysterious wealth and a city where 35,000 properties have suspicious foreign owners. So when Arnala Ayed was invited to take the tour, she signed up for our dispatch tonight from London.
You will find it absolutely fascinating and frightening in equal measure.
In London, there's a tour for every taste. But this is one sightseeing bus with an eye-opening political agenda.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Kleptocracy Tour of Russia.
The Kleptocracy Tour follows the money.
And I'm going to start off talking about a couple of properties that we've just been looking at to your left.
And in this edition, the wealthy Russian oligarchs close to Vladimir Putin who allegedly hide their ill-gotten fortunes in some of London's priciest real estate. This isn't a tour of the London you and I know, the London of famous bridges, Buckingham Palace, and Big Ben. The landmarks here are multi-million-dollar mansions and apartments, like 2 flats at number 4 Whitehall Court, where the tour begins.
We believe that they are owned by Igor Shuvalov, who is the Russian first deputy prime minister.
A high-ranking politician in Russia whose annual income is supposedly about £112,000 a year. So it would take him 76 years to save up all his salary, not spending a single penny to afford that property. Now you have to ask, where did that extra money come from? It certainly raises suspicions.
long-standing suspicions. But it was just one day after the Prime Minister said it was highly likely Russia was behind the nerve agent attack in Salisbury when the tour organizers sent out invitations. Why do Putin allies flock to London? Because it's a global hub that's safe, a place where you can launder millions in a single transaction, and all without revealing your identity. Like the $27 million allegedly paid by one oligarch to buy number 102 Eaton Square.
So we're on our way to Eaton Square, which is often known as Red Square.
Red Square because so many Russians own apartments here. This journalist and author also calls this city Londongrad.
Russian oligarchs love buying property in the most prestigious areas of London, which they regard as the sort of epicenters of the British establishment.
If you push them outside of the Western world to which they are accustomed, I think the foundations for autocracy and corruption in Russia will be heavily undermined.
So we have a mood of chill between London and Moscow.
There are hints the government may be considering it. The Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee has planned hearings this week. Invited to testify are several of our tour guides.
There's a growing recognition on all sides of British politics that this is corrosive, and actually it's the one vulnerability that the Putin government has.
In the drive to put an end to Londongrad, there's certainly growing momentum. Nala Ayed, CBC News, London.
The school shooting in Parkland, Florida sparked a nationwide call for gun reform. Up next, Paul Hunter talks to students in Baltimore who say their calls for help continue to go unanswered.
It's like they just don't care about black people.
Yeah, I don't think they care about black people either.
They might say they do, but your actions speak louder than your words.
The last half-century has been the most turbulent in world history, and it has seen a veritable revolution in how we get the news. 50 years ago, we got it almost totally from newspapers. Today, most of us get the news from television. Since it began on that first day of January 1941, the CBC News Service has played a key role in the journalistic transformation of how we get the news. So to mark its 50th birthday, we'll take a fast gallop through those years, looking at some of the events, some of the issues, and some of the people of CBC News.
It is a broken country down here, drab and desolate. A country of scrub and second growth, of rock. Rock, relentless, hard, cruel hard.
For Canadians, this was the birth of broadcast news in action, live on the scene. J. Frank Willis was reporting to Canada and to an international radio hookup at a dramatic mine rescue at Moose River, Nova Scotia. It was the beginning of live broadcast journalism in Canada, and it stimulated the Canadian appetite for broadcast news.
This is for the world. They have been saved. They're out of the mine.
That same year, radio crackled with the news of King Edward VIII abdicating his throne.
You must believe me when I tell you that I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility without the help and support of the woman I love.
Charles Jennings, the CBC's first anchorman, reported on those stories and on the march to war. His son is today ABC anchorman Peter Jennings. The outbreak of war really intensified Canadian interest in broadcast news. It was the story of the century as correspondents scrambled to report the latest developments. But at the start, the CBC was surprisingly calm. When Canada formally declared war, the CBC interrupted a lunchtime NBC music program it was carrying to read a Canadian press bulletin. That done, the CBC went back to the NBC music show, picking up the strains of Inka-Dinka-Doo. But the war quickly made the CBC realize it had to broadcast more news. As Hitler rampaged through Europe, Canadians wanted to hear the latest developments. At the time, the news agency Canadian Press wrote all the CBC newscasts, since the CBC didn't have its own news service. The finished scripts to be broadcast were rushed from the Canadian press offices by bicycle couriers to the CBC studios.
Our mission is simple, and our ambitions are unbeatable. Let's keep the guns out of the hands of the wrong people.
Hundreds of thousands of young people taking a powerful stand yesterday. They cried out against gun violence and politicians who refuse to act. One powerful message, a silent tribute to the dead. But also check out the crowd's reaction to what this fifth grader had to say.
I am here today to acknowledge and represent the African American girls whose stories don't make the front page of every national newspaper.
School shootings grab everyone's attention, but they don't represent the whole picture. The everyday toll of U.S. gun violence in some communities. Paul Hunter visited a school in Baltimore where students don't feel connected to the Parkland tragedy. They've got their own problems.
Just for a moment, forget about Parkland, Florida, the home, for now, of America's gun control debate. This is Baltimore, home to more gun killings last year per capita than any other big city in the country. On average, almost one per day. Balloon memorials mark where the dead fell, and there are lots of them. And so, as Americans talk yet again of gun control, not least how to protect its young people, consider this school, Excel Academy.
I wanted you to read to yourself about disease control.
Where students who've struggled in other schools come seeking a second chance. A place that isn't in the headlines much and that didn't spark a march on Washington, even though it has its own sobering death count.
How many kids in this school have been shot and killed in the last year or so?
8 total.
8?
8. Yep, we've lost 8 students to gun violence.
How do you feel about that?
I'm overwhelmed, sometimes just tired. You don't imagine as a principal this is part of your job, but it is.
To be clear, none of the 8 students were killed on school property. It was all out on the streets.
Let's go, ladies who are waiting for me in my conference room. Everybody else, let's go.
But as they gather for class on a week, yet another student from this school had been shot and wounded. Fear mixes with resignation, frustration with resentment.
How many people here know somebody who's been shot? Raise your hand.
3 students who face not only that, but headlines these days that convince them no one's calling for tougher gun laws in their name.
But a black person gets shot, do they do anything about it? No. When somebody got shot here, did Parkland come say something to us? No. Did we have a march? No.
Baltimore doesn't get a voice all that big because the city is predominantly black. So since the city is predominantly black, they're not going to pay any attention to it.
It's like they just don't care about black people.
Yeah, I don't think they care about black people either.
They might say they do, but your actions speak louder than your words.
As we spoke, Michaela Gray's boyfriend was in hospital. It was he who'd been shot this week, just before school 2 days earlier. It barely made the news.
Now people is getting killed in daylight. Not just at night, like in daylight. It don't matter where you at. You don't have to be involved in anything, any gang violence, any drugs, and still get killed.
Do you hear gunshots? Oh yeah, frequently. Frequently. But that's a part of the culture that's been accepted.
For Munir Bahar, that's the problem, the culture of violence in Baltimore. He himself grew up in it, in and out of jail in his teens. He turned his life around. Now, he wants to change Baltimore and all of those who say it can't be done.
There's a funeral almost every damn day of a young black man in this city killed by the hands of another young black man. That's not normal. I just refuse to accept that as normal. I refuse to just live my life and like, oh, it's all right, brothers die, it's a part of life, oh, it happens, it's the hood. No, that's not real, and I refuse to accept it. Who would like to challenge themselves? Raise your hand, please. Come on up, Wayne. Come on up, little man.
His response, the gun problem is fixable from the bottom up.
1, 2.
Munir started a program aimed at helping kids steer clear of violence.
Yeah, my man got some strong legs.
In a city where so many gun deaths are within the black community.
I want to see a young, successful man.
He teaches discipline, focus, respect, with the view turning kids into better people will achieve far more than merely protesting for tougher gun laws.
Health, education, literacy, mental health, recreation. If we're not doing this, but we're just demanding that things change without the ingredients of the change, I think that's just an absence of logic. People have died so that you have an opportunity to show your brilliance. You know when you're doing wrong, but you also know when you're doing right. The vast majority of young black men dying by guns in America are not being killed. They're not dying by AR-15s. So ban AR-15s, cool. It changes nothing in terms of the problem of homicides in the black community.
As it stands, the shootings here effectively never stop. So, up the steps and into the home of yet another family stung by gun violence, community workers Walker Gladden and Clayton Guyton.
I want to start with how your week was.
Want me to start?
Don't matter.
On this night, it's to meet with Keandre Greenidge. He was shot last year, one day after school. Says Keandre, guns are simply a fact of his world. He's 14 years old.
That ain't gonna never end. You talking about gun violence?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing that's going to stay forever.
Is it that bad? Like that's normal?
Normal to me.
Right now, the sense of urgency is so great. Immediate response is so great that I don't have time to really wait. We got to move now. You know, we dying. We got to move. You know, our young people are dying. Our community is deteriorating. You know, I like to see his face from time to time.
Walker's own son is among them, shot dead in 2016. That's him on the pendant. All those anti-gun demonstrations, they say, it's mostly people from a different America, pointing to the country's lingering racial divide on why the gun problems in mostly black Baltimore seem to get so little national attention.
Our change is still not here yet because it's so difficult. But see, we up for it. So no, we're not mad with them because, and we're not really upset with them because we know, hey, it's easy for you. You can't stand up for the problems in our community without somebody looking at you and saying, you're an angry black man. We're still going in the back door. That's where we're at.
So what is the way forward in a city with so many gun deaths week after week?
You can march all you want. You can march every day for hours asking for justice and for your voice to be heard. But if the people in the city not changing, then the violence isn't going to stop.
I pray that something will change, but then, like I said, maybe it won't.
A blunt assessment by those not yet ready to believe anyone outside the city's even listening. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Baltimore.
To put the anxiety those students feel into some more context, consider this. Last month, Baltimore went 11 full days without a homicide. Just the third such homicide-free stretch in the city in more than 15 years.
We have a lot more ahead tonight on The National, celebrating the best in Canadian music. Eli Glasner will give us the view from the Juno Awards. And she's nominated in several of the big categories tonight. I sit down with Ruth B. for the National interview. We talk about writing songs that matter and her remarkable breakout success.
We play in the woods, always on the run from Captain Hook.
Music was always in my life and I loved it, but it was always my secret, and Vine kind of helped me expose my love for music to the rest of the world. And yeah, if it weren't for that, I don't know if I would be here.
This is the way it was supposed to be. It's comical now, looking back at the Rube Goldberg device that was to be the roof of the Olympic Stadium. But back in the early 1970s, people thought, why not? The entire project was a futuristic dream, a building that would still be in vogue when there was a helicopter in every driveway. Ice and snow? Trifles. Hadn't they just landed a man on the moon? The whole thing was the brainchild of Montreal's mayor, Jean Drapeau, the national hero who brought us Expo 67. Who could doubt his visionary brilliance? Now, Drapeau is widely portrayed here as a megalomaniac who led Montreal over a cliff. But he is also ferociously defended. Hotline show host Gilles Proulx.
I think Drapeau was ahead of his time, at the head of I would say a farmer's city. What he wanted is to give an heritage to Montreal, to say in 1,000 years that stadium will be there, just like the pyramids in Egypt or the Eiffel Tower. And you're going to be glad to say in 1976, a mayor decided to go against everybody to give you that heritage, and it's one of the most beautiful stadiums in the world.
To design his stadium, Drapeau didn't want just any architect. He chose Roger Taillibert of Paris, whose previous stadiums were not just buildings. They were, according to Drapeau, poems in concrete. When they started building it, though, the extremely complicated design, combined with an orgy of greed from Quebec's unions and business leaders, drove the cost into the stratosphere. The budget went from $150 million to $800 million by the time the 1976 Olympic Games were held. And even at that, the stadium was unfinished. No tower and no roof. In the 1980s, they decided to go ahead with the tower, but it burst into flames even before it was completed. In 1986, a piece of the tower fell into the playing field during an Expos game. The team said they would have to play more heads-up baseball from then on. In 1987, they sewed up a heap of orange Kevlar and strung it up over the stadium. By this time, the cost had risen to $900 million. But Roger Taillibert dropped in to tell Montrealers that money was not an important consideration.
It's not my problem. My problem is a concept.
But it turned out that the concept was also a problem. A hydraulic failure while moving the roof caused a terrible rip in the Kevlar fabric, the first of many. Later, it seemed to rip whenever a thunderstorm happened by. The rain leaked in, the money poured out.
Ça bouge.
In 1997, the PQ government announced a final solution.
We had so many problems with it that I think the time for experimentation is finished.
A brand new roof, this one made of Teflon.
A little blast from the past. The Bare Naked Ladies reuniting tonight at the Junos here in Vancouver, just in time for their induction into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. And our Eli Glasner is there at the awards show with some of the evening's other highlights.
The 2018 Juno Awards have begun, and what a way to begin with Michael Bublé, the crooner Vancouver homeboy, returning to the stage in style. Very funny opening, but also very touching, talking about experience with his family. His son was battling cancer, son's feeling better. Michael is feeling better, seemed very comfortable on the stage, and then it was time for the music to begin. Arcade Fire, the Montreal Rockers, already a Juno Award under or thereabouts, opening the show, a rockin' version of Everything Now. Certainly one of the highlights. Many of the other bands here couldn't wait to see what Arcade Fire would do, and it was a classic, rousing Arcade Fire performance. But this year's Junos is also about some of the new voices on the Canadian music scene, and already we have some big winners. Daniel Caesar winning for R&B artist, an independent musician doing R&B his way, and Jesse Reyes winning as Breakthrough Artist of the Year. And another highlight, Gord Downey paid tribute to on this stage with Sarah Harmer and City in Color doing some beautiful versions of classic, tragically hip tunes. Eli Glaster, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, lots to celebrate with the Junos. For example, 2 years ago, Ruth B. was just 19 years old, working in an Edmonton clothing store, living at home with her parents and posting videos of herself singing. Last year, she won the Juno for Breakthrough Artist of the Year, and it has been a whirlwind since then. Concerts, a new album, critical acclaim, all of it capped off this weekend with 3 nominations. And this time, she says she's sitting back and enjoying the Junos. Ruth B. is our national interview. We sat down at Vancouver's Vogue Theatre, where she performed a few days ago, and I asked her what it's been like for her over the past year.
It's been amazing. Thinking back then, I don't even think my album was out yet, so at that time I was just really excited to get more of my story out there and have people hear what else I had other than Lost Boy. So it's been such a great journey, and I've really enjoyed, you know, getting out on the road and performing and just watching people experience my album for the first time. It's been fun.
Is there, either on stage or in a studio or I don't know where, a pinch me moment in the last year?
Many, I would say. I think every night that I just finished up my tour, and every night that I would go up and the kids were singing my songs with me, I'd never get used to it. I think it's so crazy because I wrote most of those in my room with the idea that no one would ever hear them, and so to have people kind of sing them with me was always pretty surreal.
Hey guys.
She didn't just write them in her room, she launched her career from there.
Let's be BFFs.
A teenager posting 6-second videos on Vine.
I am a lost boy from Neverland, usually hanging out with Peter Pan.
Within a week, that snippet had thousands of likes and people wanting more. It turned into Lost Boy, an international hit.
Play in the woods, always on the run from Captain Hook.
Music was always in my life and I loved it, but it was always my secret, and Vine kind of helped me expose my love for music to the rest of the world. And yeah, if it weren't for that, I don't know if I would be here.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible that a kid from Edmonton can make videos in her bedroom and then get how many people following?
It was insane in the beginning. It was thousands every day, and I think social media is so cool for that reason, because I don't think there was really any other way of me getting my voice out there. Like you said, Edmonton, it's not the biggest music city, so I think it's great because you can have people hear you when you're just in your room, so it's awesome.
Hey guys, it's Ruth B, and I'm back at my old high school, Rochette, to visit the choir class who's singing my song Lost Boy for the Canadian Music Class Challenge.
A lot of people have complicated relationships with their high school and dream about going back as a success. Not many people get to go back to their high school when they're as young as you with a hit record in your pocket.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was amazing. I loved that. It's weird because a lot of the songs on the album were like ideas that were born in high school for me, or memories that I had from high school, and so it was really cool to go back and kind of see the hallways that shaped who I was, and then get to sing my song with the choir there. It was awesome.
And for always I will say I am a lost boy from Neverland, usually hanging out with Peter Pan.
There are tens of thousands of kids around the world who want to have a hit record. You've done that now. Sometimes getting the second hit is harder than the first one. Tell me about that pursuit.
I think I would agree. I think the second song is probably harder, but I think I try not to think in terms of hits. I just kind of write and feel, and then if a song strikes something in me, I'll be like, I want to put this out. But I think if you start thinking in terms of, is this a hit, you're never going to be content.
Because I'm not perfect, I'm flawed, and if you don't like that, get lost. Because I don't want it if it's fake, I don't want it if it's just for show, for show.
I was on your Twitter account today, which I follow you. I occasionally am on your Twitter account, and I was looking today, and then in the margin, it suggested, like, since I follow you, that I might want to follow Justin Bieber or Shawn Mendes.
Nice.
And I thought, okay, what's the connection there? Young, talented Canadian musicians. Like, you're part of this incredible wave. I've not seen it in my lifetime. I mean, add Alessia Cara, they're a handful. What's going on in Canada right now?
I ask myself the same thing. I think like Canadian music is incredible right now, and there's so many, and I love how it's very diverse. Like we have hip hop and we have pop and R&B and singer-songwriter and everything, and I think it's really cool, and I'm just excited and honored to be a little part of that.
And one of them is The Weeknd, who shares the kind of ethnic background with you from Ethiopia. Is that just a coincidence, or is there something about Ethiopia and pop music success?
I mean, I think Ethiopian music is amazing, and it's really rich melodically if you listen to it, so maybe that has something to do with it.
I feel it in my bones, you're moving on for good this time. I said that's what I wanted, but I think that was a lie.
I read sometimes about hit songs, and there seem to be these teams of writers and producers, and sometimes it's hard to tell who the artist is in that kind of blender of music. You know, you're still writing your own stuff, and it still sounds very distinctively you. Do you think you're going to be able to hang on to that?
I think so. I think for me that's one of the most important things. I feel like this would be a lot harder and not as much fun if I was singing songs that I didn't mean and that I didn't connect to. So I'm just trying to tell my truth and hoping that people connect with my stories in the same way. It makes the whole experience a lot more fun.
And I know that you think you found better now, but that's only because you don't see how I dance with the idea of you dancing with somebody new.
You are so poised. Does anything make you nervous now?
Oh my God, I get really nervous, but I think it's just experience with performing. I've been doing it a lot now over the past couple years, so you definitely get used to it, but I just try to enjoy everything and have fun with it, and the nerves are there, but I've learned how to control them.
I forget the exact wording, but you tweeted something out not long ago about how, you know, avoid complacency, or complacency is death, and it's just like, so what's your goal? What do you strive for?
Oh, so many things, but I think in terms of my music, it's just to like always make sure that I'm saying things that I believe in and writing songs that matter. I never want to just put something out just to put something out. I want to believe in everything and, you know, hopefully make someone's day a little brighter or make them feel less alone.
Well, you are as down to earth as you are talented, so it's a real pleasure to finally meet you.
Thank you
very much.
You too. Thank you.
Wow, she's so interesting. That conversation you had with her about writing solo, she seems really determined to keep, you know, doing things her way, precisely her way.
Yeah, you know, a couple of years ago, there she is in her parents' basement doing these 6-second videos her way, but it gets increasingly challenging, right, Adrian? She debuted a new song at a concert on Thursday night, and I asked her if she had to clear that with her management and label, and she said, yeah, because a lot of people are invested in her career now, but she's committed to keep her voice, write her lyrics, write her music, and keep that distinctive sound.
Excellent. We have a whole lot more ahead tonight, including the moment. But first, a moment of redemption for Winnipeg's Jennifer Jones as she won the Women's World Curling Championships.
Starting to float. Starting to float. Coming back. No! And Canada is your world champion.
The Canadian team beat Sweden in today's gold medal game in Northern Ontario, toppling the Olympic champion 7-6 in an extra end. She also won the world title 10 years ago. Jones failed to make the Winter Games in Pyeongchang.
At this appliance superstore in Bellingham, Washington, there's a splash of color to this upcoming Black Friday. Not just the poinsettias, but an expected flood of Canadian dollars.
There's a lot of money up in Canada.
Yeah, no kidding. Kate Grady is a happy man. The Washington state housing market may be in recession, but luxury brands are big sellers at this store.
If you were to look at our sales last year of high-end
versus this year, it's, I would say, tripled. And if you look at where those are going, it's all going up to Canada.
That demand has literally changed the way this store looks. They've boosted the number of premium brands in these displays.
What we had initially thought of bringing in was even a lower price point, but we looked at our Canadian statistics and said, these are what's selling.
For Canadians, it's a perfect storm of proximity, parity, and prices set by manufacturers.
Most of your brands will have a minimum sale price, if you will. So they're going to say you're going to sell this appliance for X. In Canada, that X is traditionally higher than it is down here. So a Canadian coming down here on a package can save 20%. One package recently, it was a $10,000 savings.
And it's not just the big ticket items.
We get just a ton of Canadian clients.
For hairspray?
For hairspray.
And for this polish as well?
For polish and appliances are 3 items that we truly just fly off of our shelves. I mean, we definitely, those are probably like our #1 sellers, is the OPI.
These cosmetics cost $8.50 here. In Canada, they sell for $10 to $12. Even small purchases are making a big difference. Do you think it's helped stores like this during the American recession to be so close to Canada, or what impact has it had?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely think so. I think because you're still getting that demographic to come over the border and still shop with us. So even while maybe Americans are spending a little less, we're not seeing necessarily that the Canadians are spending less.
They're getting ready for Black Friday at this sporting goods store too, stocking up on a brand that was developed in Canada, Sorel's. With Vancouver's population 10 times as big as Bellingham's, it's not surprising Canadian tastes would have an impact here. It's the reverse of the U.S. elephant looming over the Canadian mouse, although the store manager prefers a different analogy.
The American economy is like a racehorse. It's either standing still or it's going too fast. The Canadian economy is more like, and I say this with all due respect, it's more like that workhorse or plow horse that just keeps going and does well. And so whenever the Canadian economy is good, we get more business, and it has been stable up there.
And so the biggest retail day in the U.S. will draw a lot of British Columbians. At the border just south of Vancouver, Black Friday is traditionally the busiest day of the year for Canadian cross-border shoppers. You will no doubt see pictures of department stores like this one opening at 4 a.m. to accommodate the rush. But some of the Canadians who are here on this day say you couldn't pay them to battle the crowds on Friday. You guys coming down?
No.
Why not?
Don't like the crowds.
No, probably not. It would just mean it would be really crazy, and I prefer it a little quieter.
No, you're not going to get me to come down here for the worst shopping day of them all.
It's supposed to be the best shopping day.
Depends what you're in for. If you're in for the bargains or the lineups.
And hey, if he has a change of heart, there will be more bargains ahead. Ever mindful of the Canadian shopper, some stores here have added a sale that is not very familiar to many Americans. Well, here's a look at what we're watching this week. Monday, the deadline for Kinder Morgan to clear trees for its Trans Mountain pipeline expansion before birds begin nesting. Dozens of protesters, including Green Party leader Elizabeth May, have been arrested in Burnaby recently for violating a court injunction keeping the public away from Kinder Morgan-owned properties. And Newfoundland and Labrador, Quebec and Ontario will all table budgets. On Tuesday, the Newfoundland and Labrador Premier, Dwight Ball, promising it will be, quote, steady as she goes. But a different story in Quebec and Ontario. Both Liberal governments are facing elections this year. On Tuesday, Philippe Couillard's spending plan will include billions to pay down the provincial debt. And on Wednesday, we'll get a sense of Kathleen Wynne's plan to get re-elected in Ontario. Will the Liberals there abandon plans for a balanced budget? It has been 5 months since Canada lost Gord Downie, and tonight the Junos paid tribute to the tragically hit frontman, and that is our moment of the day.
Gord Downie was given a native name, and his name was the man that walks among the stars. And with that name, that's what he is now today.
Words. Fearless. Prolific. Truth. Generous.
Brave.
Dreamer.
I know there's a lot more to that, but I have to say, Ian, just watching the first part, we know that the Junos can be sort of a big, raucous event, but you sort of get the feeling you could have heard a pin drop, and I think that's the way it's been for so many of these tributes to Gord Downie, that there's just so much respect that silence just says a lot every single time.
And this has been such a Canadian story, you know, the Tragically Hip, a big band right across the country. We saw it in that montage. But if you went sort of further south of the border, I think on the border towns like Buffalo, and they may know a little bit about the hip, but you go deep into the United States, they don't know. But it's just been this incredible Canadian story. And I don't know if this is the last chapter tonight, but certainly another great chapter. That is The National for March 25th. Good night.
Good night.